안녕하십니까? OSBC 오픈소스 2022 웨비나에 참석하신 것을 환영합니다. 이번 세미나는 두 세션으로 이루어져 있습니다. 한 세션당 시간이 짧기 때문에 쉬는 시간 없이 진행하도록 하겠습니다. 세션 1은 Snyk의 CICD Piplines and Security Controls for Application Developers입니다. 세션 2는 Taste of AppSec Demo입니다. 웨비나가 종료된 후에 경품 추첨을 통하여 소정의 상품을 제공할 예정입니다. 마지막까지 함께 참석하셔서 유익한 강의가 되시기를 바라겠습니다. 그럼 웨비나를 시작하도록 하겠습니다.
Welcome to This is Architecture. I'm Lana with AWS, and today we're talking with Jay from Snyk. Hey, Jay.
Hey, Lana.
Thank you for coming down. Would you mind telling us about Snyk?
Sure. Snyk is a developer-first application security company providing security controls within the tools that developers are using today to build their modern applications.
CICD pipelines are the heart of a development cycle. So how can we use, me as a developer, Snyk as a part of code pipeline on AWS?
Great question. So the Snyk action type is available to developers today that are using the code pipeline service as a free integration that they can simply use a pull-down menu and enable right within their code pipeline service.
And how is this action different from, let's say, pulling down your source code from a repo?
So the neat thing about this integration is that we heard our customers cry. Developers are always wanting to work fast, develop fast, and the last thing they want to do is be burdened with additional tooling or anything like that. So this integration provides security controls right within that experience without developers having to leave the AWS console.
And why is it important to scan for vulnerabilities as a part of your build?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we've published a security report that polled a number of different respondents, and what we found was that vulnerabilities are growing in the past 3 years by a rate of 2.5 times. So we're anticipating that in the next 4 years or so, 70% of vulnerabilities are going to affect containers and misconfigurations of those as well. So it's crucial for developers to have actionable insights early in the process or shift left in order to avoid those pitfalls down the road.
Gotcha. So I select a new action type, which is a Snyk check. What happens next?
Right. So what happens next is the code pipeline service is going to direct the customer to our API gateway running on the Snyk infrastructure. At that endpoint, we're going to authenticate the customer. If they're a new customer, it happens immediately. If they're an existing customer, they can authenticate. And then some additional metadata is going to be processed into our DynamoDB table, where we're going to make the association of that customer with the code pipeline, the specific pipeline in code pipeline that they're using.
So we're pulling in the artifacts from S3 bucket, and we are scanning them for vulnerabilities.
Right. So that's the first flow for this integration, which is initial setup and then configuration. The customer is going to select a few options for how they want their integration to behave. Things like whether they want to fail the build if there's any vulnerabilities, or if they're developing and they just want to explore, they can opt out of that. But after that happens, any subsequent run from the customer's pipeline through this code pipeline service is going to interact directly with our AWS Lambda that's sitting in our infrastructure. That Lambda function is going to write some information into EventBridge that's going to capture state and things like that. And then a series of additional Lambda functions that are in step functions are going to go through the complex logic of determining which customer's pipeline is associated with our configuration information, where the objects are, the artifacts that we're going to be scanning. So as part of this integration, the code pipeline service is going to take the source code that's in their SCM, and it's going to create a copy of that in an S3 bucket in the customer's account. These step functions will then consume that artifact and then go through a series of steps on whether we're doing a full scan, whether we're doing partial scans, things like that. And what we're doing is we're looking for the package or the manifest files, package.json if it was a Node app, and we're going to look through what vulnerabilities are potentially there from some of the open source dependencies that are in the customer's source code.
And we've got some results. Let's say, how do I remediate, or what do I do with this information that is now in my S3 bucket?
Right, so the report is going to be provided to the customer within the code pipeline service, where they can see an HTML rendered report on what those vulnerabilities are. Now, if you're a code pipeline customer today, you have a number of different options for which SCM products you happen to use. It could be Code Commit, it could be Atlassian Bitbucket, or GitHub. We have integrations with each of those SCMs as well, and what happens is that a developer that's using, let's say, Atlassian Bitbucket as an example, they're able to then submit fixed pull requests through Snyk to their Bitbucket repository so that they can remediate those vulnerabilities. Once they've committed that, through that integration, the next pipeline run will trigger another scan of their source code. And the idea here is to iteratively go through and pay down some of the technical debt with some of the vulnerabilities that we're finding, so that you're confident that the application you're deploying is not going to contain any vulnerabilities.
Awesome. Jay, thank you so much for coming down today and telling us a little bit more of how to make our code more secure and easier to use for developers.
Thank you, Lana.
And thank you for watching. This is My Architecture.
이어서 두 번째 세션을 진행하도록 하겠습니다.
Starting out, I'm going to look into code pipeline. So what I have here is kind of a rudimentary pipeline that I've built out, and you can see that it's just deploying to an S3 bucket. That's not usually what we would do in a real life scenario, but for the sake of this demo and just showing, that's just how I have it set up. Now you can see here that I have a source that in the middle of my deployment, I have a very important step. I have a scan. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to edit this, and I'm going to show you how easy it is to add Snyk as a build step. So what I did is I selected add stage, and then I went into the stage and edited it. From there, I chose an action name, which I just chose to be scan just to make it really easy to understand. And I chose Snyk as the action provider. I did that under the invoke stage, selected it there, put my input artifact as a source artifact, and then I connected to Snyk, which is actually free to do. You can set up an account for free. And whenever I connected, it gave me the option to break my build based on a severity threshold. So in this case, I chose high and critical level vulnerabilities. And I'm just going to go ahead and hit cancel here because I already have it set up. But what happens whenever I run this pipeline, you can see that I did this earlier, is that this scan should fail. We should be excited for failure in this case because we don't want these vulnerabilities to go into production. I'm going to go ahead and release this change again. And what we'll see is this is going to start scanning, and then this should subsequently fail again. Then what I'm given is a report based around those findings that I can look at through these details here. And in the meantime, while this is happening, since it's going through and pulling everything and doing the scan, I'm going to quickly show the AWS Quick Starts from the page right here. So there's a couple of them that we have available, and I'm going to kind of drill down into the Snyk security one, for example. So you can see here that we get a really great summary of what this does. It tells you what you're going to be building. You have some reference architecture here available, and then you have how to deploy it, and depending on which one you click, which preference that you need, it'll jump to basically a CloudFormation template that shows you just a couple of different inputs that you can do. And it's very, very easy to just build out and implement pretty instantly. So what we have is that this scan did fail. And the results will show in an HTML format. And I challenge you, if you haven't used this feature before, go ahead and do your own scan and see what those results look like. What I'm going to do now is kind of transition over to the Snyk UI and show what it looks like from our perspective. So I have that very same project here. And you can see that everything is laid out very nicely. I have great insight into the vulnerabilities that exist within that project. They are all prioritized. And in this case, I'm looking at Snyk open source. So that's going to be the software composition analysis. And again, this is something you can use Snyk for free. You could sign up today and you could start testing your projects. One of the other things that I would like to demonstrate and talk about is IAC, or infrastructure as code. So in that case, you can bring in things like CloudFormation templates, Terraform files, and looking at it here from the perspective of the Snyk UI, we can get insight into the issues that exist within those files. So in this case, I have an AWS project that I was working on, and you can see right here, I have it highlighted, and it brings me the information of what this vulnerability is. So in this case, the credentials are configured via the provider attributes. So the impact, which is just kind of spelling out why this is an issue, is that the provider attributes can lead to accidental disclosure of credentials in configuration files, variable definition files, event logs, and console logs. And the way that I can resolve it is lined out pretty specifically. So if I were to, on the side of AWS, set the access credentials via environment variables and remove the access key and secret key attributes from the configuration, that would be solved. It's that simple. And then similarly, if you're a developer, you can run these tests within the CLI. So you're going to see those very same results. You can have it on your local machine, and you can get all of that context information within the terminal. That way you can make those changes way earlier on instead of having to wait till, something is already in production or further along in the process.
이로써 오늘 웨비나가 모두 종료되었습니다. 앞으로도 유익한 정보로 웨비나를 진행할 예정이오니 많은 관심 부탁드리며, 아울러 웨비나 종료 후 경품 추첨을 통하여 등록해 주신 번호로 전달될 예정이니 확인 부탁드리겠습니다. 바쁘신 와중에도 웨비나를 참석해 주신 분들께 감사드립니다. 이상으로 웨비나를 종료하도록 하겠습니다. 감사합니다.